here this afternoon. Just in terms of explaining why I'm chairing the meeting, I know I mentioned it in closed board this morning, but for the purposes of any members of the public and for the record, as per Jeff's update at previous board meeting, I'll be chairing this board until the end of March in the first instance, and Jane Cummings will be chairing the Gloucestershire ICB board, which will hopefully allow Jeff to focus on the crucial work on transition of the cluster ICB, future state, and the work of the transition committee. It is obviously very reassuring that Jeff will still be around this table, and there is a formal link, obviously, from transition committee reporting into this board. In addition to transition committee, I know I mentioned it this morning, we have a really important day job here as the board to make sure business as usual goes on. We have very significant objectives to achieve this year in a really challenging environment, and it's on all of us to make sure that we keep this focus so that we deliver what we said we would this year, because it's the right thing to do, and it will also help any future ICB as well. I do think the committee chair updates will help us as a board, because they can do, and they do some of the what we call the heavy lifting. And I think today also we have got 4 really important substantive agenda items, which Shane will lead with his team for us, which is a mixture of for discussions and approval. So before I go on any further, Jeff, is there anything you would like to add at this point?
No, I think you've covered it, Alison. Other than to say congratulations to Shane. I know I did it at the private board, but in public, well done, Shane, on being appointed as the chair of BNSSG and Gloucestershire Cluster. And I'd also say that my initial engagement with Gloucestershire, which has been numerous across the system, has been incredibly positive, and I'm very optimistic for the way we will take things forward. So I think we're in a good position. Thanks, Alison.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeff. So in terms of apologies for today's meeting, we have apologies from John Martin from SWOST. We have apologies from Mark Cook from NHSE. Richard, you're here with us. I think you need to leave at 3. It's good to have you until then. From Bristol City Council, we've got apologies from Nick Hubbard. We've got Hugh Evans here on his behalf. From the Bristol group, hospital group, we've got Maria Kane's apologies. We've got Stuart Walker with us, which is great. And we've got apologies for this afternoon session from Ruth Hughes from OneCare. So have I left anybody out, Lucy?
No, that's it, everyone. Thanks, Alison.
Right, lovely. Thank you very much. So in terms of declarations of interest, are there any new declarations of interest for anything on the agenda today? Jeff.
Alison, just the point I made this morning, which is now as the chair of Gloucestershire ICB, there could be some conflicts there, and obviously I would remove myself if there was, but I don't foresee it, but it should be recorded.
Thank you very much. And Shane.
Yeah, and the same applies obviously as Chief Executive of Gloucestershire, as well as at BNSSG, the similar approach, and I again would remove myself if required.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, good. So in terms of the minutes of the 4th of September meeting, were there any matters of accuracy? I'll take the minutes in their completeness. No, so we will sign those off as an accurate record of the September meeting. There was one recommend closed action around the corporate risk register, which I think doesn't need any discussion. I think it's a closed action. So were there any other matters arising that people would want to raise at this point? No. Okay. So just in terms of we'll go to Shane's Chief Executive report now. Just in terms of future agenda items, it's really important that the Transition Committee does have its own standing agenda item. Jeff, I'll leave it with you where you would want to come in. I know that Shane's going to mention one of his 3 big messages around the changes, so leave it with you where you want to come in. But Shane, over to you first.
Thanks very much, Chair. So as usual, 3 big messages in the Chief Executive report. The first is obviously what's happening with regards to the change and transition. The second one is probably the biggest product we will have to produce, which is neighbourhood health. And then the third one is about an element of assurance about how we work with public health. So I have noted at the very beginning, and I'll ask Jeff to come in pretty much straight away, is the transition committee took place since our last meeting. And in my report, we talk about what it is. But Jeff, obviously you chair the transition committee. I wonder whether you want to come in on this moment in time on the committee and what it was discussed.
Yeah, I can do, Shane. So we had our last meeting, and we've got another one tomorrow morning. We've agreed terms of reference across both ICBs and the membership of the group. So there's non-exec directors from both integrated care boards on that transition committee, and of course relevant executive members. We've also got some external involvement in it as well, with local authority and South West Ambulance Trust. The group itself, we've agreed frequencies and how we're going to work. I think the business now will start tomorrow, where we start to look at what proposals there are for structures. The one thing I would say is we need to communicate the messages out of the transition committee really, really clearly. And I know we've done that after the first one, but we need to make sure that everybody is informed. Because the early, as I said at the start of the meeting, the early engagement I have with Gloucestershire has been incredibly positive. But there's a nervousness about, I think, the chair and the chief exec, who've both come from being SSG, now being the chief exec and chair in Gloucestershire, and having to reassure people this is not a takeover by Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire of Gloucestershire. This is about creating a new organisation and about us ensuring that we carry on with the business of the two organisations until that happens. And Alison did it in the introduction, Shane, but I think really important to stress that we still have statutory responsibilities as integrated care boards that we have to deliver. And that's why I'm really keen to make sure that both Alison and Jane Cummins in Gloucestershire can focus on the business of the ICB, which is what we're here to do. And me and you can carve out that space to make sure that we're thinking about what the new organisation looks like. So tomorrow's meeting, we'll talk about the project update, the communication, and any potential risks. But I think so far the signs are very positive. But I know you will update on where we are with timescales and the financial position, Shane.
Thank you, Jeff. So, colleagues, what I've also then placed into the report is, from an executive perspective, what we've been doing. So the two executive teams have been working very closely together. We've met on numerous occasions to begin to work out what an operating framework might look like for a new clustered organisation. We're beginning to understand really what the purpose and vision of the new organisation is, and very much about how we will work together. Because quite clearly, as Jeff said, both ICBs will continue to exist. We will, of course, be in cluster form. We've got lots of work we have to do in our existing, but we also have to forge the model for the new cluster, and we're working on that as colleagues. What I would stress is that, and this obviously is a public meeting, and therefore I will share what I can in the public meeting. We are looking at what is possible with regards to the timetable. Clearly, when this all began, there was quite a large amount of noise about getting this done quickly. It's very clear that the amount of resource required for change resource, primarily voluntary and compulsory redundancy resource, hasn't quite materialized in the way we thought it might have done. That has slowed the pace down, and we are bringing a paper to the transition committee tomorrow, which talks about when we'd be able to go for executive consultation. I don't believe that will be in October. We will be looking, hopefully before the end of the year, to put executive consultation. And I think what that will mean is the actual consultation on the complete organisation will not be until at least March of next year at the earliest, but I think it will probably be into 26, 27. Other points then in my report, really important piece of work going on at the moment on neighbourhood health. We, the ICB, in partnership with local authorities and others, will be responsible for developing new models of neighbourhood health. Huge amount of work going on in that space and in true partnership space. But what's really important, the idea of the neighbourhood health system is a combination between what we, the NHS, can bring, but actually it's much more about how we develop neighbourhoods, develop populations, work, under the guide of the health and wellbeing boards and other areas like that, to really put the appropriate models in place to improve the health of our population at neighbourhood level. Huge amount of work going on there. We've done a lot of stuff in what we call Health Together 2040 to help set the direction for that. But this will really be a key role of the ICB and the cluster working together over the next number of years. And the final thing I put in is a piece of assurance. And I think it's really important because it shows how we do work as partners, but we also take our responsibilities hugely seriously. We get reviewed, I might even word assessed once a year by OHID, the Office of Health Improvement Disparities, to see actually how are we doing with regards to our duties in public health and our partnerships with public health. So I've placed a letter in as the appendix, but also just summarised what the outcome of that visit was. And I bring it to our board because I think this is really the crux of how we will have to work in future with our public health colleagues, because actually we're on the same game, the same pitch. We've got to make sure that we're about improving the population's health. And I bring it because there were a lot of successes, a lot of strengths identified by OHID. You can see them in the report: strong place-based relationships, good partnership working, innovative commissioning. So I bring it, there are obviously opportunities for improvement as well, and you can see those in there. And sort of, I suppose, a slight warning to us, which is when we start getting into clustering, please don't drop this thing. Okay, I think that's probably the best way I would put it in the letter. And absolutely, I think it's exactly what we need to do. So, Chair, that's a quick summary. As I say, I'm not going through huge detail, but happy to take thoughts, comments, and/or questions.
Thanks very much, Shane. Open it up to colleagues. Any comments, questions for Shane on his report? I had a quick question. I'm really pleased you included the public health item, Shane. And when you look at the areas, there's lots of really good work, full stop. I was really interested in their addressing hidden inequalities when they talked about hidden inequalities with more affluent or ageing populations. Is there anything in the areas for improvement or considerations that they've highlighted that we need to now rethink and re-amend as an approach?
No, and I'll ask Joe to come in. Joe's put a hand up as well. I think this is the crux of how we get hyper local and make sure we invest in the right places. But I'll let Joe speak because we've done a lot of conversation about this. Joe?
I'm sure.
Yeah, so this was conversations that we've had, and we're an interesting place and becoming more interesting, aren't we? Because we've got a very urban city, we've got rural, and we've got coastal. And so there is a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of areas of hidden deprivation within all of those sort of geographical clustering. And as we start to cluster with Gloucestershire, that's going to become it broadens it even further. And I think we're all very aware of data, and population health data tells you some sort of story. But the more you go up and the bigger the population, it becomes clearer, but it also becomes slightly less true. Because actually within a population or a village of, say, 200, 300 people, there is variation, and there may be a small number of people with something quite significant deprivation, both through to wealth, access to service and healthcare provision. And so we need to be careful that we have the big picture, we translate it down into local, but we also understand that ward level nuance and make sure all of that's discussed. And I sometimes think we need to be careful to always think of the quantitative and the qualitative. So we have our data, which extrapolates from, million and a half people, and we can see things within that. But we've also got to hear what the social workers and the healthcare workers and the pharmacists tell us about their place and their people in place, because they will know. And I'm a GP by background. I knew my registered list of 10,000 people. I absolutely knew what those people lived, whether they had access to transport, work, and what their health outcomes are. You live it, you're part of that community. So you have to bring both those bits together to make decisions about resource allocation and strategic shift. Neighbourhood, I think, going back to the original point, neighbourhood gives us that ability to come together to bring data in, but also that voice of people, voice of communities, and voice of practitioners who know and work with those people. So I think that's what that's referring to, Alison.
Okay, Joe, thanks very much. Dave, you'd like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And I was also going to just welcome the positive feedback in respect of the public health function. It was really pleasing to see that, Shane. So well done. And equally, I think we've seen similar feedback coming back through individual unitary authorities through the assurance processes that have been taking place, running in parallel with that, which is nice to see. And of course, as you've said, Chair, what it really does do is place the importance of our directors of public health going forward into the new structures that are developing around both the new health system, but also new local government systems as well, and making sure that we pull those together, working effectively to make sure that we can have positive impact going forward. So yeah, just wanted to add my positive contribution to that, Shane. Well done.
Oh, thanks very much, Dave. Julie.
Yeah, support all of that. I suppose the only question, I think it's in there, but I'm just raising it, is when you then look back at when you're looking at form follows function, do we think, if you look at the words, do they reflect strongly enough that public health? I know it talks about population health, just making sure we don't lose in that sort of thinking about the executive structure. There's something about having public health in the governance, but actually really making sure when you're thinking of that structure, there's expertise that can actually take advantage of that. So that was, and I'm sure it is there, but it didn't jump out as strongly, but I think that's because we use different language.
Thanks, Julie. Shane, I'm sure you want to come back.
Yeah, I think Julie hit a really important nail on the head. We will not be a massive organisation into the future. We won't. That's just not the way we're resourced. What we have to be is the conduit of the many, many professional voices into our system. And one of the key voices is public health. There's no doubt about that. And one of the key conduits, and I'm going to give Jo her credit here, is the Chief Medical Officer role that has been played over the last couple of years to make sure those voices are heard and act as a conduit into the system. We cannot lose that process as we begin to develop the cluster, because actually there's also a danger as we get bigger, the voices don't get heard as much. Okay, so that is absolutely in my thinking, Julie, is how we make sure that the voices are not only just heard but amplified, because our role of the new ICB is so much more dependent on the kind of conversation we're having around neighbourhoods, public health. So it's not only important to the structure, but it's got to be a really strong conduit into everything we do.
Thanks very much, Shane. Jo, back to you.
Just a little bit of a build on what Shane's just said. So myself and the DPHs, I think right at the beginning, year one, we kept bumping into one another, and we were very aware of that. And so we then got a bit of, again, if board remembers, we talked about healthcare outcomes and health outcomes. We talked about what's in the sphere of the NHS and what's linked to the wider determinants. And then we keep on using, and myself and the DPH is like that, who's leading in this, who's partnering, who's contributing, what's advocating. And the reason I say this, as we get into neighbourhoods, if you're not careful, everyone gets so enthused by the agenda, you're all rushing together, but you don't use your limited expertise well, and so you dilute your power. So we've worked together, myself and the three DPHs, to be clear, well, am I leading that or are you? Am I contributing or supporting you? Sarah, Matt and Christina. And we're really explicit about that as professionals. And I think it's a really, there's some real power in that way of working as we get into multi-integrated teams, because if not, you do end up just duplicating, and we don't have the time nor the resources to have that luxury of duplication. So we've been quite disciplined, and that's describing that to Justin, the regional DPH, was one of the reasons. And not only have you got a good relationship, but you're working well together, you're working effectively together. And I think there's something to mirror as we start working in a slightly different way over time.
Thank you, Jo, very much for that. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. I think you've said something similar to what I was going to say, that this is about how we work as a collaborative, a system. And in effect, the beauty here is that the public health function is sitting in unitary authorities with the DPHs, and that's really fantastic. But working with you and others, we've got cover, we've got the whole thing joined up, which is the brilliant bit of all of this. It's exactly where we need to be to understand the populations and the subsets of communities that we're needing to engage with, so the granularity, but have the data that can help us do that. So how we use our data across the system is going to be important. And the final bit, I'd say this is given that, and I declare an interest. Obviously, UE is a big supporter and provider for public health in CPD, but also in postgraduate development. Ensuring that the new generation of public health faculty also get the new architecture and embedding that in the development programs to make sure that they're ready to go into a world that's very different, perhaps, from the old physician-led world within the NHS. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I think genuinely we are ahead of the curve. I think the work that you've done and the DPHs have done have put us in a strong position, and that's brilliant. It's a great bridge, great bridge.
Thanks very much, Steve. Shane, just in terms of neighbourhood, just confirm what you think board will be. It's so crucial, isn't it, to going forward? What you would expect board to see and when in terms of neighbourhood next?
Yeah. Thank you, Alison. So as we've discussed in closed session and in the system exec group, etc., we're trying to build an overall architecture to design the model of neighbourhoods and how we will work together. I would expect neighbourhoods to be a standing agenda item on all our board meetings moving forward. It is the big ask of ICBs as part of the 10-year plan, which is to commission neighbourhoods. We have some key milestones and clearly getting ready for 2026, our commissioning plans, etc. So for me, Chair, formally, I think every month from now onwards, we need to have neighbourhood health as part of our board agenda. Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you very much, Shane. Thanks for your update. As always, a lot of interest in what you pull out for us. Let's move on to the items for assurance and approval. The first one is around the progress against the equality objectives, and it's to discuss the recommendations are to note the progress being made and to discuss any other strategic or other considerations we'd like to consider. So just to land those recommendations for people before Joe, over to you, and you can set us off.
Thank you, Alison. So as you remember, we agreed this through a board workshop. We agreed what our objectives would be, and we landed on 4 specific objectives. And remember, they were to be specific and granularity that would have an impact on people, rather than broad, rather non-specific, ambition-led things that we will reduce health inequality. So the whole point of these objectives is to give some granularity to that, and that's how we landed on the 4 measures that you see in the paper. This is to give you an update on these. They're led by different executive directors. So just briefly, I'm going to bring in my other colleagues just to say where they landed. So first I'll start with Rosie, who owns the maternity objective. Rosie?
Thanks, Joe. So board members hopefully will remember that as a LMS system for BNSSG, we were selected to take part in some work with the NHS Race and Health Observatory, and the area we chose to focus on, which supports this objective, is in the disproportionate preterm births of our mums who are racialised Black and Brown. And as part of that, we identified that there was a lower administration of magnesium and steroid for these mums in their preterm period. So the team's been working closely with the RHO, and we're mapping the pre-project uptake of these 2 medications and the post-project uptake. We need to do some more data validation, but we got the early data through from UHBW. It's looking really, really positive. So really, really pleased with that. MBT are just doing some more work on their data quality. The next bit, of course, will be to see the outcomes improving. That will take a bit longer. So the LMNS team are looking at every single preterm birth, identifying any themes and trends. That will come through later. And then they're also doing a piece of qualitative work with mums to identify barriers they have to their treatment pathways. We've got a celebration event in November and we'll present the data there. But as I said, early look and validated data from UHW is really strong. So good progress, Joe. I think by March we'll be able to demonstrate significant progress in this area.
So hopefully by March we'll have some data sets for you to see.
Absolutely.
Improvement graphs, which will show granularity of impact.
Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you, Rosie. Ethnicity data, slightly more mixed picture, and you'll start to hear how some of the impact of our changes have maybe slowed some of the progress we would have liked down on this. So Debs, can I ask you to give a quick update on ethnicity recording?
Sure. So since the report has actually been written, we have made some changes. So obviously there's a thing about board reports being slightly out of kilter, but obviously we were seeking for our intelligence centre to be able to give us some support to be able to capture that ethnicity data and triangulate, given that there is information that flows into the federated data platform, which we now have live and active in our ICB. We have, since the report was written, reinstated the procurement, and actually I have the procurement for the Intelligence Centre evaluation that hit my inbox this morning. So a lot of that challenge that you see highlighted in the report will be eroded in the next few weeks so that we can actually start to make progress. In the interim, it's still really important for our providers to still stay on top of this, and I know there's lots of conversations that are happening with the data quality leads and all of your organisations. So one of the asks would be, it is only when all of us focus on collecting this data. This is not something simply for the ICB to do. This is a system endeavour to ensure that all of us are actually capturing the data that enables us to understand all of our impacts as a collective system. So I hope, in the same way as Rosie's highlighted, in the next update, that we'll see some very clear progress and we will be able to give a very tangible plan. I'm very aware that this is a narrative update. It doesn't include hard deadlines and dates, but I hope that will be rectified once we get the Intelligence Centre rolling again.
Thanks,
Jo.
Jo Hicks, you're one on the workforce.
Thank you. So just to be clear, colleagues, this is the workforce of the ICB, not the system-wide workforce report that comes in the new calendar year. So you will have read through the detail, and we do have some specific data against each of these objectives. But obviously there is a narrative that runs through all of them, which is the fact that the announcement at the beginning of April had a significant impact on our ability to deliver what were our stated objectives for this year. We have had and still have a robust organisational development plan, which was directing our activities and meant that we wanted, obviously, very much to focus on the inclusivity and a number of these deliverables. That said, we have been able to thread through, as we have been supporting organisational change and pivoting the work that we have been doing, we have been able to thread through a number of those actions. So where we have the guaranteed interview scheme, where we are talking and working with the colleagues on reasonable adjustments, especially for interview processes and as part of organisational change, and specifically being really, really clear based on the intelligence that we have got within objectives 2 and 3 around our BRES and our DES data, that as we engage in organisational change, that we will absolutely expect anybody who is part of any type of recruitment process to be fully equality and diversity trained. And we have been developing a training package to support staff as we go through that. Part of our commitment through the transition committee and through organisational change is that we are working very, very hard to not become less diverse as a result of this restructure. That's a really important feature. It was part of the organisational development plan as we were going to mature as BNSG. It is absolutely part of what we will do as we become a cluster. We then, obviously, as we start to think about what that cluster organisation looks like, need to make sure that the culture that we have reflects the values, reflects the learning that we took prior to in agreeing these objectives, but also as we've gone through this year, and make sure that we are using positive action very specifically around that, the need to be a very diverse organisation, representative of what will then be obviously an enhanced and broadened population set. One thing that we have done as a result of some of the intelligence that you can read in the paper is we had initially paused our anti-racism programme. You recall that as a board we've had a long conversation about our system anti-racism statement. We took a number of actions away to work with system colleagues. That has continued, but as the ICB itself, we had endeavoured to engage in a full anti-racist development programme for our most senior leaders. We had paused that due to organisational change. We have just made the decision, given some of the intelligence that we've learned as part of this work, to reinstate that programme, and that will actually be kicking off in November. So I'm pleased to be able to say that is a really important shift that we have made. So I'll stop there, Joe, and let you carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the final group is the improvement in hypertension finding and management for Black Afro-Caribbean and Black African groups in our population. This has been taken on by the Health Improvement Team, led by Adra in particular. They pulled together a little working group, which it has paid public contributors in it. A third of it to be quora, a third of it has to be people racialised as Black or Black African, Black Afro-Caribbean, otherwise they're not quorate. So they've really taken seriously that diversity agenda. And that group has done work to try and unpack what are the blockers for this population, because it's very easy to say that it's cultural. Well, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? And then we move on. So this group has been trying to unpick what sits beneath that. And even you'll see in the report the word mistrust. Well, what does mistrust mean? And it's different things for different peoples and different sub-communities, and people coming from the huge continent that is Africa. With Africa have different views to people coming from the Afro-Caribbean communities. So they've tried to unpack all of that. They've done a lot of work on it, some of which is shown here. And that will lead to a set of commissioning principles about how we think about this in a more nuanced way, rather than I keep talking about the one silver bullet that's suddenly going to solve all of these complex problems. Of course, the world is not like that. So we're trying to get beneath that bonnet and say, what are the elements here, and how do we take that into the way we commission services, so we don't keep on reinforcing the structural inequities that we all know are there, and yet we seem to struggle to unpick. So I'll stop talking and take questions.
Thanks very much, Joe. Jeff, over to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Alison, and thanks for the update. And I know people are trying hard on this, but we've got a long way to go. And I think the system changes have been a major distraction. But if you look at the issues on that we were talking around on data and retention and progression, the data, I think it's really important that we are capturing that in the right way. But Tracy Joliffe, who can't be with us today, who's the chair of our IAG, she has just produced a paper that I think the Peace and Crime Commissioner is going to pull people together on, which talks about the impact on people who are Black and brown in the Southwest, and it is not good reading. It is really, really poor. And I just think the things that we talked about here are the right things, but we do need to be measuring this. Now, the question I ask is, where does that sit going forward? Because as strategic commissioners, does that sit in an ICB? And I'm talking about the system-wide as well as the organisational work here, or does that sit somewhere else? And I had a conversation with the regional team yesterday, because I think this is something we can do at scale as well as individually in organisations. But I will finish with we are going to make a statement in Gloucestershire in the next 24 hours around the rise in racist incidents, impact on our staff in health and social care, and what our commitment is to it. And I don't think we've done that yet in BNSSG. Now, I've pushed back there and said we need to make sure we got the data and we need to make sure exactly what we're saying. But there's a real strong commitment there to do it. And I would appeal to us to be doing a similar thing in BNSSG. I think we need to think about how we bring this back in to the committee, because actually we need to be throwing up that data and seeing how the dial is turning and looking at that in a bit more detail. And I know Jay is doing that in the people committee, but perhaps we need to think a bit harder about how we're actually doing it and how we're demonstrating our leadership. Thanks.
Yes, thanks very much, Jeff. Steve.
So this is really just an offer. Given that increasingly we are going to be focusing on place and place-based decisions, it would be worth reaching out and seeing what other organisations are doing in this space and seeing how much commonality there is and where we can connect. So there's an open invitation. I mean, UE has been working on this for a couple of years at least, and it starts with recognising we were institutionally racist. A big thing to say, but it's then led us on a path where it's very purposeful. It's a whole university approach, including engaging with our student and staff communities and building curricula in a very different way and educating very differently. I just think that we've got an opportunity to share here that will help, because part of this is we need to be growing the workforce of the future as well as having an existing workforce go on this journey. So open offer.
Thank you, Steve. We do like an open offer, don't we? Let's
just respond to
Joe,
that
do you want
one,
to come back in on that?
Yeah, just on that one, we've already made it. I can't remember the name of the guy that produced that report, but I've seen that your report. It is brilliant. We've already made links through the research team, the Race Engagement Network, so that connection has happened. And I think I mentioned to you in Fed, I want us to build on some of the work you've done and make that maybe a little bit more formal, actually. But thank you for the offer. It's a great piece of work that your lead has done.
Lovely, thanks, Joe. Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. A really helpful report. Can I just pick up with Joe Hicks? Joe, the stuff you said about the training and the work you're doing is really positive. I know all organisations are really worried about the impact on diversity of these changes, and so we're keen to work with you on that. I just wanted to ask whether you've completed an EQIA at this stage, or whether there's one in progress. We're certainly trying to use one at a regional level to support the process.
It's in progress, Richard, as in we have one and we are permanently updating it. So as we go through transition, so yeah, it does exist, and it's as you can imagine, it's a growing document. So but yeah, it is there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Shane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose it's just important. I think this paper raises a really crucial dilemma for us actually as an organisation. The purpose of these objectives and this paper was for the ICB to look at the things that the ICB, the organisation, could control. Okay, that's the purpose of this paper and the purpose of these objectives. But actually, you can't look at the ICB without thinking of the consequences for a system. And that's where the dilemma lies, because in the new construct, which is called the ICB2, what levers do we have to influence the system? So Jeff, your question is, how are we going to, as a system, really get some of this to land? Well, the ICB, the organisation, the tool we'll have is commissioning. Commissioning alone will absolutely not make these changes. So it does take this board into an interesting conversation, and not for today, that ICB, the organisation, will not be able to deliver this for the system. Okay. Well, and therefore this paper is about us, ICB, the organisation. But it does ask the question, what role do we have in the future about a system convener, a system influencer, a system changer outside of the rules of the new ICB? Because I'm very confident we will address the issues in this paper through the ICB, but the scope of the outcome is just for the ICB, not for the ICS. And I do think what we replaced the Integrated Care Partnership with, health and wellbeing boards, the conversation we've had before, is actually where these questions need to lie, not necessarily answerable by the ICB, the organisation.
Thank you, Shane. Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, this is a conversation I need to pick up with the regional director for NHSE, and I'm about to, because I've got the lead for EDI for the Southwest for the NHS, and I'm not sure that sits with the chair of an ICB. I think it probably sits with the chair of the new board or the new chair within the NHSE region, but it might be somewhere else. I suggested the Police and Crime Commissioner. It might be something like that that fits across all of our footprint, because this is bigger. You're absolutely right, Shane, than just those objectives. But we all do have a legal requirement against those 3 points that are within the Act. And so we have to demonstrate our commitment to removing racism and promoting equality. So it's not something we can, I'm not suggesting we ever would, but not something you can walk away from. We need to be really clear, not just as an organisation, but as a system, how we're coming together on it. And we've talked about this for 20 odd, 30 odd, 40 odd years. Being clear on how we do it, I think it's going to be really important.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. So there's lots going on, isn't there? There's what the ICB is control of, which is what this paper was created to give us, granular objectives that were very specific and progress against them. And I think we need to take those in that concept. I had a couple of fairly practical questions around that, but then the question then, Shane, is because of the bigger piece, we clearly don't want to lose sight of what we're responsible for now, but how do we, what is the mechanism for making sure this moves forward the way that you're describing? So can I just ask a couple of practical questions on this paper first, if that's okay, to finish off the paper? I think the ethnicity data is an interesting one, Deb, and I'm really pleased you said that it's not as it's written here, which said 2027, because from how I read it, the data is literally about collecting the data. The important thing is what you do when you've got the data. So if we weren't going to collect the data till 2027, then lots of questions around that. So I think it will play into what do we see back here at board against next progress. But I'm really pleased you said it wasn't going to be that way. Things are changing. So I look forward to that. I know John Cappock's put in the chat room, he was concerned about timescales as well. So we'll watch this space because you've given us a different view verbally.
And Alison, it's not as though we're not collecting any data. It's about improving it, because it's about that we've got gaps in the data. So I don't want it to be that we're not collecting anything, because that's absolutely not the situation. But we've got to get it to as close to 100% as possible.
But this has always been the case. We've always been collecting some data, and it just. But the prize isn't the collection of the data. The prize is what we do with the collection of the data and what it tells us. So I think the focus on data collection rather than getting it done and then moving on with what the data tells us is the key bit. It talks in the financial implications that the financial implications haven't been assessed around this piece of work. So it's, financial implications of delivering the objectives haven't been fully assessed. I guess the question is, it doesn't flag up as a risk. So is there no risk because the financial implications haven't been assessed around delivering these objectives, or is it an emerging risk that we need to think about? And then the bigger point is this trust issue. I think trust is a really important thing, and we talked about it a bit this morning, and this mistrust, which is, yes, Joe, we have to define what mistrust means, but that's clearly got to be one of the fundamental things that we work on and understand and improve before we can get anywhere else. Neighbourhoods are going to be built on trust, aren't they? So I'm just really struck by that trust-mistrust dynamic. But I'm guessing, Shane, when I come back to you, we will have another update on these, and perhaps more thinking will have gone along about short-term, medium and long-term actions for some of these things. So shall I take Rosie and Jay's comments first, and then I don't know if it's Shane to you or whether coming back to you, Joe, to finish this. Yeah, good. Okay, so Rosie, let's have your comments, please, and then Jaya.
So it's the trust bit, Alison, and we know the trust will take a long time, and there's many very valid reasons why trust has been lost and why people are mistrusted, and that's some of the qualitative work we're doing in the maternity service. Now we've got our reformed MMVP who are connecting with our women in their communities, and that's the qualitative work the team are doing to underpin the RHO work is getting underneath that. And we're starting to see some improvement at Black Maternity Matters programme. We're starting to get feedback through our links into our community. The women are starting to feel safer to come into our services and starting to trust us more, because they are seeing and feeling a different experience, having done the Black Maternity Matters programme now over several iterations. So we can and are improving it, but it'll be very tailored. And that's, I think, what Joe's saying around the piece of work around hypertension. We need to get underneath the why, and there are different reasons why, depending on which group we're talking to. And then we need to, in a really targeted way, focus what that community needs from us. But, pleased to say maternity, we're starting to feel and see a difference.
Thank you, Rosie. That's great. Jaya.
Thank you. Mine's going back to the diversity for the ICB staff and how we make sure we don't slide. I guess I just wanted to articulate the thoughts that, well, as we know, Bristol is the more diverse of the populations that we have. And what we don't want to see is that we slide down to the average. What we should be doing, especially now that we've got increased tensions, more violence, more unrest, we don't want to reduce the black and brown faces that are appearing in our workforces. We want to show, this is also about trust, that they should feel not uncomfortable. They should feel comfortable having a very diverse workforce. And we do have a big part to play. As Shane was saying, we can't solve this for the system, but equally I know that each of the system partners will be on this too. But I wanted to just say that we should not be sinking down to an average. We should set minimum diversity standards because of what is coming. What's coming is not going to be good. And if we're not seen, it'll be worse.
Yeah. Thank you, Jo. And I think that what Jeff's put in the chat, which it needs to pull back through into the minutes really, is that Jeff's going to want to add an equality impact of organisational change as a standing item agenda at the transition committee, rather than just a line on papers to the board.
Thank you. And Alison, just to say, we didn't do that. We did it as a line on the papers, but we didn't do that when we did the 30% changes. And it had an adverse effect on our black and minority ethnic staff. Nothing intentional, but Jaya's point is absolutely right. If we don't keep a sharp eye on this, then it will just happen, and nobody will be deliberately doing it, but we will be in a position where we become less diverse.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jaya, for raising that one. Jo, I think summarising, finalising, moving on with you. Thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to try, and I always worry about this, I'm going to try and share a paper. Can you see the top barriers to hypertension treatment slide? I will send this around. I didn't manage to get it in the papers, but I did share it with Shane, and he did encourage me to share it with you. And I think I show you this because look at the factors that actually having a group of people from these communities has identified around medical literacy, health literacy, and trust, and the number of areas where that impacts. This is just on hypertension treatment. And so I suppose I'd ask you, as you get into your work about service redesign, have you done this for prostate cancer? Have you done it for dermatology lesions and eczema? So we do need to, as Rosie says, she's doing that in the maternity world. It is very specific depending on the illness, the background to the illness, the history of that illness over hundreds of years. And we just need to be humble enough to hear some of that, so that when we then do agree to a way forward, it's based on what people have told us with the lived experience. Because this group, no disrespect to many of us here, maybe one, we aren't the people that this affects. So there is something about asking the question and not jumping to a solution too quickly. But I said, it just gives you, this is evidence of the level of granularity that the team have got into it about this one bit of one condition. So again, just wanted to share that with you. And your last point about the financial risk, Alison, I'm going to say something controversial. This is so fundamental to the work we do. I think this is BAU stuff. I don't think there should be additional funding. It should absolutely be core to the work that all of us do. And I think Shane and my executive team, I can see you nodding, would agree with that. So that's why I don't think it's a financial question. It's just business as usual. And if it isn't, you should hold us to account for that. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, very clear, Jo, and welcome. Thank you very much. Jacob's just put in the chat, he's keen to understand how we get greater diversity within the new ICB board, Health and Wellbeing Board, senior leadership decision-making roles. Is there an opportunity to improve this with upcoming restructures? Yeah, there's Jeff's nodding there.
Jake, the answer is yes, Alison, because we've got to constitute a new board, and that's always an opportunity. We obviously can't impact on wider partners, but in the new ICB world, we'll have less anyway. So, yeah, the answer is yes, we can, and yes, we should.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Jake, for raising that one. So, Jo, I think we are noting progress against the paper. I appreciate you're pulling it together. Lots of executives are leading on various bits, but really helpful to see it. And we will see it in due course. Hopefully you'll pop that on the forward planner so that we can see it back again. And hopefully the comments were helpful today in terms of
very helpful, Alison. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, Jo, over to you for 6.2, which is WorkWell West. Over to you.
Thank you. So thank you, colleagues. I'd just like to welcome Lawrence Ross and Paul Gaunt to the call. The paper that we have provided for you today, and I will ask Paul and Lawrence to talk through a few slides in a moment, is an update on a partnership approach that we as BNSSG have been in with Bristol City Council on the delivery of what is a DWP funded work and health initiative called WorkWell. And this is part of the wider white paper, Getting Britain Working. But it plays to some of the conversations that we've had already today around neighbourhoods, around population health, around the wider agenda that we have as an ICB and as an ICS in supporting our healthy population. And that includes good work and access to good employment. So I will ask Lawrence and Paul to come in, and then we can pick up any questions afterwards. Over to you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Joe, and thank you, Chair, for welcoming us to this meeting. So myself and Paul, we're just going to go through some slides, which I'll bring up now for everybody. And because these were submitted with the paper, what we will do is we will skip through them. But anyway, I'd just like to introduce Paul.
Yeah, hi, my name's Paul Gordon. I'm Employment Support Manager with Bristol City Council. We're the main delivery partner for this programme.
Thank you, Paul. So as Joe has already mentioned, WorkWell is a DWP funded provision that aims to help people return to work after a period of ill health, or to remain in work and thrive. And we've built a very strong and effective partnership with Bristol City Council in the delivery side, but that has spawned kind of other partnerships and deeper partnerships that has helped the provision kind of reach into communities and neighbourhoods that we wouldn't have had access to through kind of standard routes. And we want to kind of show you how that looks and what we've done to achieve that, and the way forward for the work and health agenda as we progress through this. But Paul's just going to give an overview of Bristol City Council.
Yeah, as I said previously, we were approached by the ICB when this region came out. We deliver a wide variety of employment support programs, both regionally, locally, and within the community level as well, such as our Specialised We Work for Everyone Learning Difficulty Programme, which is a multi-agency programme across 3 local authorities that we manage. We also got a multi-agency approach on sort of to tackling rough sleeping in the city as well, which is proving to be highly successful. We think that we established a concrete partnership here, and a really good partnership. We already had strategic agreements in place and a track record of partnership working with WECA, DWP, the VCSE and local employers. This has also done is the ability through working together in partnership has brought us the ability to sort of work closely with WECA, especially with Connect to Work as well, and the development of that new service as well. But we work really closely together. I think we've got a fantastic partnership. I'm here with Lawrence at the minute in Temple Street. Lawrence and Emma Heath, our GP liaison officer, work every Wednesday from City Hall, which is when I bring my wider team in, about 45 members of staff, or employment support related stuff. And it works really well because we've got visibility, accessibility and accountability all in the same room. And not only can we talk WorkWell and share information about WorkWell, but having the ICB and the NHS represented within my team has enabled us to sort of bounce ideas at an operational level as well. Where we've had issues, we can go straight to Emma and get sort of local solutions as well in place. So that's working really well together. And when we put this funding application together, we not been successful, I think there was the appetite there to do something. What WorkWell really given us is the infrastructure to get things really started, really kicked off. As Lawrence will show you, we're delivering to target, we're delivering within budget through working effectively together, and we're going for, we've got a 1-year extension already, and we're going for further extensions, which will then help us increase the level of partnership working that we've got across the whole of the West.
Thank you. So the partnership with Bristol City Council is central to the effectiveness and the delivery of WorkWell. And when we sat down and wrote the bid, we also envisioned that we needed to reach into communities and we needed to deliver provision within neighbourhoods and at local. And that's why, along with the West of England Combined Authority and Green Social Prescribing, we combined funding to put a procurement exercise through the VCSE brokerage to recruit VCSE organisations that could deliver provision, but also recruit into WorkWell from those neighbourhoods and communities where maybe we wouldn't have that reach, we wouldn't have that standing, and we wouldn't have that trust, as I've heard already on this call. And we were using VCSE organisations to build that trust and to help us develop WorkWell. And that has been really successful, and so successful that we're looking to do another round towards the end of this year. And you can see that in the data that I present on screen at the moment. I'm not going to talk through this because you can see that over the last 12 months, the provision has grown into being really effective and hitting target, as Paul has already said, but also our satisfaction scores have increased. What's important is the next slide, really. And what we can show here is how in Q3 of 2024-25, when we started the provision, we were kind of focused mainly on Bristol, if we're honest, with a few kind of outreaches into South Gloucestershire and into North Somerset. But as you can see, as the provision has grown, the numbers of individuals joining from different areas has also grown quite considerably. And that's due to a number of key kind of recruitments. So in Q4, we recruited a health liaison officer that Paul has already mentioned that brought GP practices and primary care to the provision and helped us build really strong links with those GPs. We've also had Job Centre come on board at that time, and we started delivering events. As we move into Q1 of 2025-26, we also start to link up with treatment pathways in hospitals. We add prompts onto EMIS and other systems within GP practices, and Emma's delivering more within G practices. And we also have 1 month of VCSE organisations being on board. And then as we move into Q3, you can see that the spread has significantly increased. Actually, that's Q2. I'm sorry, that's a typo on my end. As you can see that the spread of people has significantly increased. The density has also increased. And that's because we've had that increase in event delivery, that increase in VCSE delivery as well, and recruitment and feedback. And we've also onboarded an employer engagement officer. And I'll just, for the last couple of minutes, want to kind of progress on to the complexity of work in health as well. So as you can see, and I know this is quite a big kind of colourful display here, but as you can see, it's not, when we look at maybe the health barrier that is reducing somebody's access to employment or work, there is always, and as you can see from the slide, there is always something else or a non-health related barrier around that as well, that's actually contributing maybe to the health concern, but also exacerbating that the kind of barriers to employment. And that's why it's so important that we have experts in the room, such as Bristol City Council, such as the VCSE sector, and such as education providers and the combined authorities, because none of us, I think Paul will agree, that have the single silver bullet to answer these questions. It's about bringing the experts together, bringing different routes and pathways together to answer the question together. And that's kind of what the Get Britain Working Plan is kind of aimed at. It's about bringing local plans together from a number of different sectors and a number of different stakeholders to deliver 10 years worth of reform within this work and health agenda to bring individuals to good work and hopefully the health benefits that go with it.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Paul. safe to say, colleagues, this was a standing start. So there was very little for us to build on. So there has been recognition from DWP national team how far BNSSG has travelled, and we have been held up as an exemplar for others to learn from in relation to the sort of momentum that we have been able to gather. As has been alluded to in the presentation, there is still more work to do. Throughout the paper, you'll see reference to the fact that we need to broaden the diversity of the group and access, and there are plans in place to do that. And that actually we now need to think about how this fits in to that wider Getting the West working plan that is part of the WECA growth strategy as devolution, etc., continues. So much more to do in this space, and look forward to the discussion. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks very much, Jo, and thanks, Jo, Lawrence, and Paul. I thought the papers were excellent, the progress was excellent, and the slide deck was great. So let's move on to Jo Medhurst and then Ellen. Thanks.
I think just had a very strong discussion about structural inequity. I think, Jo, you won't be surprised looking at the chart in section 1 where the majority of people are female and white. I just wonder whether we could strengthen the commitment to diversity, a bit like talking about the working group cardiovascular. To be quorate, you had to have out of 7 people, 3 people had to be from the racialised Black and African communities. Could we be a bit more specific, a bit more intentional, and be absolutely sure we're not reinforcing such structural inequity in that programme? And I've got your things to be developed at the end. It would be really nice to have something about that diversity, that understanding from communities, like we've done with hypertension. What is it? What do we need to do? And how do you get people from their communities to influence? And again, I don't know what the makeup of the team is, but have we got the right cultural diversity within that wider WorkWell team? Question mark. Just a few of those things I'd like to be assured on. Thank you.
Jo, do you want to hold off and I take
Yes.
Ellen's comments, if that's okay? Yeah. Ellen, do you want to come through?
Yeah, can I just thank Jo, Lawrence and Paul? I think this is an absolutely excellent piece of work. And the fact that you've already got some really good results is just really good news. I think this is a part, I think sort of in the early days of the ICB, we identified that we needed to have a look at the economic part, sort of side of the system. And I think you've addressed this here. What you've described is, I think, really professional. A couple of questions for you. Any early learnings? What are your hard measures of success in terms of, I can see that you've made an impact and you've expanded, but, what would you expect to happen as a result of this? And in terms of supporting our GP colleagues in this whole area, what are we doing there? So can I just thank you again for the work, and really interested in it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Ellen. Jo, I'll let you go back on Jo and Ellen's comments before we take others.
Thanks. And just a heads up, Lawrence and Paul, I'm going to bring you in on the early learning element and the hard measures. So Jo, completely agree, and we do need to go further and much further in terms of what our data is telling us, because at the moment we have really only interrogated it at the surface level, and there is a lot more underneath that. So our steering group, which is a system-wide steering group, is also asking those same questions. So that's the next iteration of the evaluation as we go through. And absolutely, to your point about structural inequity and those communities and the makeup of the team. And we do need to take a look at that as we move into this second phase, because we didn't know where this was going to go. We absolutely did not know. So now that we have a year's worth of intelligence, then it's time to build on that. So we will come back through the People Committee and to this board with updates as it progresses. In terms of the early learning and those hard measures, Paul, Lawrence, just your thoughts on that, please, given that you're in the thick of it, as it were.
Yeah, so if I go to the second question, which is about kind of supporting GPs, colleagues, and moving into the future. So we have also been successful in kind of gaining some funding for kind of fit note reform that we are working with our kind of primary care colleagues on at the moment. And one thing that we're hoping to do is to work with surgeries to place work and health coaches within GP practices, so that GPs will be able to, and other members of the primary care team will be able to refer individuals straight into these work and health coaches on site, and they won't have to go anywhere else. They'll be able to interact with the primary care, with the organisational team. We're also hoping to provide some better guidance around work and health, and also we've got an AHP hub pilot being delivered within North Somerset by Public Health in North Somerset, and we're hoping that might kind of give us some greater information about the knowledge, the roles, and the support that GPs need from AHP colleagues in order to deliver this better. And then on early learning, any learnings I'm going to pass over. Cool.
Early learning for me, probably safeguarding is a major one. When together we started delivering, we saw a really significant rise in some fairly severe safeguarding, especially around mental health. We ended up sending an ambulance to someone's house and having them break down the door. We've had a couple of other quite serious issues. Whilst we had fairly robust safeguarding procedures in place through our existing delivery, it was clear that we really needed clear pathways and to work very closely, not only developing our staff, but supporting our staff as well through sort of peer reviews and meetings and support for them, because we had one particular member of staff that was particularly affected by sort of one of the issues that we're dealing with. So safeguarding the complexities of mental health was one. I think the second element really is around the balance during the early days of risk and reward, because there's a 40% element of our payment is actually payment by results. So it was really about how we balance growth within the team, within our profiles as well, our targets as well. And we balance that growth with the income that we were getting, and we were both fairly risk-averse organisations, and so we're very much around sort of that planned growth. So really, to where we are now, we're running at 100% target. We cash flowed at 90%, achieving 90% of output. So we've actually generating more money. And in fact, we've already met this morning with the managers, and we're just going back to the VCSE market to increase the capacity, because we're running at full pelt. We need greater capacity from the VCSEs, social prescribers, physios, psychotherapy, and talking therapies and things. So that's enabled us to grow. It's really paying close attention to the planned growth has enabled us to then now further expand downstream the work we're doing with VCSEs as well.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Lawrence. We've got more comments and questions. So can I take Fiona, Jaya and Jacob together, and then we'll see where we get to. So Fiona, over to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. Thanks, Joe, Lawrence and Paul. Just for context, I'm here as the representative for the VCSE Alliance, and I've been following the WorkWell programme from the get-go. I had conversations with Lawrence at the pre-application stage, and how we helped as the VCSE to develop this. I have to say I'm absolutely delighted with this progress. I think that we should be celebrating the incredible success. I know that there have been challenges. There are a number of points I want to make. One is we've had a long conversation about neighbourhoods and neighbourhood health plans and how we're developing those areas. Well, I think that the learning in this should be feeding into the plans for neighbourhood. I'm really curious as to how we might be using the data to look at the core determinants of health. I know that this programme is about getting people into work, but we know that there are barriers for people getting into work, and mostly they're going to be around the core determinants of health. And I was interested on your very colourful chart that transport was a key factor, and transport is something that we talk about a lot and as being a barrier. I also think that this is an absolutely great example of cross-sector data gathering. You know, we know that we've got barriers, and we've talked about the intelligence centre, and the fact that the VCSE aren't contributing to the data sets yet. But we are through this programme, and I was very keen to see that in the paper you're moving the platform into Elemental. That's the social prescribing platform. And when we were setting up Elemental all those years ago, it was because we very much talked about data sets being comparing apples with pears, but in Elemental we can compare apples with apples. So there's a richness of data that we can be mining here, not just for the WorkWell programme, but for the system. And I do think that this is a real test bed. So yeah, there's a number of points there: core determinants, data, transport, but also the real value of the VCSE. And I'm delighted to know that you're going back out to the VCSE, because I think that we can very much add value to this kind of work stream. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Some really good comments in there. So hold on to those, Joe, Lawrence and Paul. Jaya and then Jacob, please.
Thank you. I'm pretty excited about this WorkWell programme. It's kind of reminded me back when I was sort of doing a lot of Chamber of Commerce stuff. I was sitting at a ministerial roundtable where the CEO of a medium-sized manufacturing company had said the applicants that he had were unemployable, and those that he felt compelled to hire were unwilling to work. And I remember thinking and saying, there's bound to be more to that. There's probably health issues and other issues that we're not shedding light on. It made me wonder how well we're going to be working with employers who face significant shortages. Are we targeting them? Can we do so? Can we also join into the skills agenda in some way? Because there's so much potential with this. My mind is kind of bubbling. Yeah.
Thanks, Jaya. Thank you. And Jake.
Thank you. A really exciting piece of prevention work, this, and I think if we can hardwire that, the data flows, it demonstrates. So I work in Horfield, which is, you've highlighted as an area that has a high sick note rate and unemployment due to being signed off sick. It's a huge challenge. But for every individual that isn't working for 6 months, they have a 50% chance of going to work. If they're off for a year, they've got a 90% chance of never working again. And we see that, and we're seeing 18, 19-year-olds coming in, following the lines of their parents, asking to be signed off. How do we hardwire sick note giving into this approach so that it has to go through this? How do we build in the job centre as being part of that? How do we follow people through in terms of their health outcomes and access to health services? People that are in work are healthier, they use less health resources. That's, you know, there's lots of evidence that demonstrates that. And if we can follow that, you've done a huge amount with such a small amount of money. Would be my observation. And just a third question, for those that don't have English as their first language or language at all, are they able to access these resources?
Lovely, thank you, Jake. So now, Joe, there's quite a lot in those 3 comments. So
yeah,
it would help if there was a singular response, if you like, rather than 3 of you responding to each point, if that's okay.
No, sure. So I'll if I pick up just on sort of on Fiona's and on Jaya's, and then I'll ask Paul and Lawrence to finish with the sort of the specifics around the access point. So I think that's really helpful. So yes, I totally agree with Fiona around the neighbourhood health, and we have plugged it in from an ICB perspective. There is more plugging to do around the wider determinants and the breadth of the potential of what is a very, very small focused area of work, but where the learning is absolutely has the opportunity to go very, very wide indeed. So and that breadth, that widening is coming. Conversations about what we do with this from a strategic commissioning perspective as we move into our new sort of ICB approach, but also the fact that actually a key feature of the Getting the West working plan, which is a WECA led piece of work that we are fully involved in, where this is a fundamental example and is a case study as part of that work. So that is, and to Jaya's point, that is actually where the employers come in, and having those conversations and those discussions about good employment and what that means, and about our local employers. It's not just about public sector employment. Yes, of course, we feature significantly, but it is about our private sector colleagues as well. So it's a very exciting and emerging agenda, and we have got a really solid base to start from as a result of this WorkWell programme. Lawrence, Paul, final words to you, please.
Yeah, so just on the kind of the access, so we do employ and we do hire kind of transcribers to is it translators?
Translation service.
Yeah, we have a translation service that allows individuals from multiple different communities to access the service as well. And also on one of your other points, the Fit Note report reform funding will hopefully start us on that journey to kind of linking up the system together, but hopefully we will get there with government help and some national support as well.
Lovely, thank you very much. So Jaya, your hand's up. It's an old one. Okay. Right, well, thank you very much. Joe, your hand is now up.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I just wanted to highlight that as this is a growing agenda, we do have a plan to have a seminar session of this board on their work and health agenda. So that will come towards the end of this year. So there is an opportunity for us to do a deeper dive as a collective. Thank you.
That sounds great. And Joe and colleagues, thank you so much for this. You can see the level of interest and the level of support in what you're doing. As you said, Joe, it's from a standing start, and now you're entering the next phase. I think we've delivered the recommendation to comment and discuss the impact and the integration of work and health. So I think we've done the ask that you asked of us. And thank you very much for everything you do. And we look forward to the next update. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, let's go on to 6.3, which is the VCSE Vision and Developments, and this is for approval, Debs.
Yes, there should be Mark Hubbard and Gemma joining us. Ah, there you are.
I can see
hello there,
Mark.
Mark. Perfect. I'm not sure whether Gemma is joining. Mark is the key person who's going to present this. So obviously, the paper that you've got today, Mark's going to take you through. This is a significant piece of work that's involved a lot of input from both Mark, the wider VCSE. Shane's been instrumental in this space, and Sarah Truelove, who was responsible for the strategy team before me. But I think what's really important today is that we're looking for your support to take forward the next steps approach, which you can see in the requests. And I will hand over to Mark to take you through the paper. If we assume, Mark, it's been read, but if you can take people through the key areas that are important to amplify. Thanks so much. Over to you.
Thanks, Debs, and thanks, Alison. And it's great to be here back at the ICB board. So I'm Mark Hubbard, I'm the VCSE lead at the Integrated Care Board. I was last here with Fiona last summer. And when we put that last paper to the board, there was amazing and brilliant support from the ICB board for the work we're doing. And since then, we've made really good progress in lots of developments. So the VCSE Alliance in our system now regularly engages with over 270 diverse VCSE organisations across the footprint. And it runs a network of Alliance ambassadors. There are 150 of those VCSE leaders providing diversity of thinking and community expertise in system planning, delivery groups and committees, and etc. So that's really great progress. The VCSE Alliance brokerage, Lawrence mentioned several times, which is brilliant. WorkWell is one of the programs that our new co-designed route to diverse VCSE market called VCSE Brokerage has collaborated with, and that resulted in WorkWell's case of 16 VCSE organisations receiving small awards to deliver in neighbourhoods on the excellent WorkWell programme. And 60% of the awards through VCSE brokerage are now going to organisations that have never transacted with the NHS before. So we're reaching the bits of the VCSE market that we have never engaged with previously. So that's good progress and good background. And now the paper before you is for a new VCSE vision and framework for action. So the vision is a system where health creation and equity emerge from trusted, inclusive partnerships, where VCSE organisations are valued as co-creators of a healthier, fairer future and are at the heart of everything we do. So this is the first time we've had a vision in our system, and also for the first time there are 5 goals centering on culture, planning, decision-making, delivery and learning and innovation. And up to this point, I think large public sector and government may have thought of the VCSE as a homogenous lump that just does delivery in communities. These goals begin to articulate the different roles of diverse VCSE organisations in our system at different stages of the commissioning cycle and thinking and planning and strategising, etc. So I think this is a really great development. Under each of the goals, there are a set of possible actions that we collectively believe will take forward the agenda of involvement and integration and alignment with diverse VCSE organisations in the system. These actions have been kind of sense checked, and they're a portfolio. In this changing environment, the intention now is that a new BNSSG strategic VCSE group will help us prioritise these actions so that they have the maximum contribution and impact in the changing environment, particularly with Healthier Together 2040, neighbourhood health, the shift to communities, strategic commissioning, 10-year health plan. So what we didn't want to do was make a fixed plan. We wanted to do something that could iterate and be flexed to have the maximum impact in our changing system. And so the ask of the board is to endorse the vision and to support the setup of a new BNSSG strategic VCSE group. And I'm going to stop there. I didn't do slides. I resisted you. I resisted my natural tendency, not any practice. I hope that introduces the paper. I'm very happy to have the conversation.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for resisting. I think you did a really good verbal update against some excellent papers. So thank you for that. Right, let's open this up. This is really exciting stuff, isn't it? So Shane, should we start with you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think what's really important from my perspective, first of all, I think the work that has been done within BNSSG through the Alliance and through other things is brilliant, okay? But what I want to make sure is when we move into the new clustered organisation that we can really magnify the value, not of the VCSE as a provider of service, but as thought leadership in the cluster, as actually helping us drive new thinking around commissioning. And that's why the vision and the 5 goals is so important, because if we can place that down saying this is what BNSSG believe the goals are in that vision, we can bring that proudly into the cluster and make sure we don't spend 2 or 3 years trying to work out how the VCSE fits in the cluster. We're saying, guys, this is what we're bringing to the table. And that's why it's a really important paper. Of course, we could always improve it. Of course, that 300 VCSE could become 3,000. We know all that. But actually, what we've got is really good foundation. Can we move it into the new cluster organisation by, as a board, committing to the vision and the 5 goals?
Lovely. Thank you very much, Shane. Jeff, over to you.
So fully support the paper. Shane got his hand up just a bit more quickly than me there because I was about to say the same things. The one thing I was going to say was I sat at the AGM for Gloucestershire last week, and it was absolutely abundantly clear that their connection with the voluntary sector was really strong and well established in Gloucestershire. It is easier because they got a footprint that's coterminous. But there was some brilliant stuff presented at the AGM, which were virtually all coming from the voluntary sector. And when I asked some questions, they just didn't even know what some of the things that were going on in the hospitals and in the community from the voluntary sector and be an SSG. So that link up, I think, Mark, is going to be really important. But I think Shane's right. By way of a vision and principles, this sounds like a sensible way forward.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Jeff. That's very helpful. Steve?
Yeah, no, I'd echo that. I think I'm just reflecting 3 years ago when we were having a very early conversation, I think down in Weston-super-Mare, about how to engage with this sector. We all recognise the power of it, but also the potential of really embedding in communities to deliver for us. And it required us to be a little bit brave in terms of procurement and funding, but boy, has it paid off. This is really great to see. So I'd encourage us just to keep pushing and developing this as we go into our next phase.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much, Steve. Jaya, please.
As someone who has a day job as running a social enterprise, obviously I will be very enthusiastic about taking this forward and making sure that we enable VCSE sector organisations to be able to scale together and grow and become more stable. So I just wanted to say from social enterprise perspective, absolutely.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jaya. Fiona, over to you, and then Dave.
Well, I can't not say anything, can I, coming from the VCSE? Absolutely brilliant piece of work. Mark's worked really closely with us in co-designing and shaping this. I think this is a really exciting place, considering the journey that we've been on collectively as an ICB board, as a system, and as the VCSE and the VCSE Alliance. We know that we've still got work to do, but we've come such a long way. So with the neighbourhood plans and the 10-year health plan and the shift to strategic commissioning, we know that we've got a part to play there. And we really welcome, Shane, your comments about thought leadership. That's where we feel that we've got a big part to play. We've got a lot of insight, a lot of intel, and we really want to help shape. And we've already been delivering. We just need to join up the dots. We're already there. So thank you. Really appreciate that.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Dave?
Yeah, and just add thanks and agree with Fiona's comments. And I think it's nice to see how the development of relationships with individual VCSE organisations is now developing and strengthening into an alliance framework as well, which I think is really positive and will be very powerful moving forward. Given some of the conversations we've had earlier about future frameworks, I'd certainly welcome the opportunity for a presentation, subject to my chair agreeing it, to come to our health and wellbeing board as well, because I think there's some development work that we could do in that space. So I'll certainly put that offer out there.
Thanks very much, Dave. I'm sure that will be happily accepted. I can't see any other comments or questions. What we're being asked to do as a board is endorse the vision and framework and to support the establishment of the VCSE governance, the new strategic VCSE group. I think, Debs, Mark, I think you've got full support from the board. Hopefully you're receiving that loud and clear, and we will look forward to what you do next. So thank you very much,
Thanks,
Mark.
Alison.
Thanks, Debs.
And well done, Mark. Great job.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all for your comments.
Yeah, thanks very much. Right, Shane, let's go on to corporate risk register, please. Item 6.4.
Thank you, Alison. So I'll bring Rob in a minute, because obviously Rob is the officer who drives a lot of this. I think just to put a little bit of background, as you know, corporate risk register, we build that up from within the organisation. So just to refocus, the corporate risk register is from within, and we're taking inputs, obviously. Whereas the strategic risk register is looking across the system and saying what are the risks and the mitigation from across the system. So they are connected. They are two separate things. Anything from within that starts to heat up, so over a score of 15, could find its way into the corporate risk register. Whereas the strategic risk register, with the system exec group is the basis, we have that conversation. We explore what is a risk, what isn't a risk, the mitigation. So they're two different things. But the board need to know both and need to be happy with both. Some changes in the corporate risk register this month, highlighted in the document, and I'm going to ask Rob to come in and just talk to those, and obviously talk to then the strategic risk register as well. So Rob.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you. And firstly, if you're looking at the corporate risk register, let's do that first. You might be going, I haven't seen this before. Well, the answer is you have. You've just seen it in a different format. So responding to the request from the board, I think it was back in July, we've tried to make this a little less spreadsheet orientated, and therefore you've got a risk pretty much on 1 or 2 pages. So the corporate risk register includes a summary, which is broken down by directorate, and shows gives a risk a title. Obviously, then you need to go to the relevant page to actually look at what the risk description and what the various mitigations are. In summary of the risks that are on the corporate risk register, that is all of those that scored 15 or above at a point in time. 3 of them have reduced in score and are therefore recommended to come off the corporate risk register. They're highlighted in the summary table with grey text around funded care budget, clinical safety risk management arrangements for digital systems, and elective variable activity. And then a couple of risks which have either not been on the corporate risk register because they're new, or they've risen in their score and therefore come to the corporate risk register and therefore are shown on to the board by virtue of their score. The Oliver McGowan mandatory training and the impact of the NHS reforms on ICB performance. There is always a lag in the production of this risk register, and that is because firstly we need to harvest the risks from the directorate, from the internal process that we go through in advance of sending the corporate risk register and the system executive risk register to the audit and risk committee. And I'm sure John will nod at this point to say yes, we saw that at the last audit and risk committee, which is why the risks are here. In saying that, I'd also want to just go, Jo, I haven't forgotten the point you made at the Audit and Risk Committee, which was it would be nice to have a heading in a slightly different position. We'll get there with the next iteration of this. So thank you. And then probably therefore wanting to go say that's all I want to say on the corporate risk register. There may be questions, and obviously exec leads are here and are in a position to articulate, respond to those. The system executive risk register is, as Shane said, something that we get the input of the system executive group to. Our ICB execs provide updates. They're reviewed by the system executive group and then are shared with the audit and risk committee. Due to timings, the audit and risk committee didn't see the copy of the system executive risk register that you are looking at today, but were briefed on the changes that were going to be necessary. Why? Because the system executive group didn't meet until the day before the audit and risk committee. But I think that's broadly where we are in terms of process and the risks as described. And Alison, I think there's probably an opportunity for people therefore to ask questions.
Thank you, Rob. That's a lovely segue into people making comments and asking questions. John, over to you first.
Thank you, Alison, and thanks as always, Rob, for the work that you do in the background behind this. We did indeed see this at Audit and Risk, and I think the one that I really just kind of want to emphasise is my concern around the Oliver McGowan risk, and really, a plea to system partners around giving this far greater focus and really, looking to fast track it. And I know for all of us who have to, to complete the ESR related, compliance training, I know that this is it's a bigger, it's a bigger commitment, but it is incredibly important. Like Oliver and family were really badly let down, and we of all regions, I think really have to be seen to, to have embraced and complied with this. So I would really kind of urge us to to do all we can to to comply, whether it's kind of in-person events, larger potentially kind of sheep dip type of approach to get more people to where they need to be on this. I just think it's really, really important. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks very much, John. Yes, Shane, over to you.
Yeah, and I think I'll bring Jo in as well. I think this is, I suppose, the risk we have here is we've had a very strong Oliver McGowan training team within the ICB, led through Joe's directorate, with some really lived experience trainers, magnificent people with learning disabilities, with autism, with ADHD, ASD, who are coming and going, right, I'm going to help train, and it has been a real movement. But the ICB is a small organisation. As we then go into the wider system, I think the risk is raised, which is the system really ready to take on that kind of level? And I appreciate, you know, we've got employees who are people with experience who are in danger that we're going to have to let go. Okay, but that's not the risk. The risk is, how do we make sure that the momentum for Oliver McGowan training continues throughout the system? I think that's the risk that we're raising. So it is a corporate risk for us, but we'll come to an end. It might become a system risk, because then it's about how is our system. And you are correct, the reputational damage here could be quite considerable. But having begun to meet Paula McGowan on numerous occasions, working with her and understanding, this is a you know, a really important bit of training. Government have agreed that, the Secretary of State's agreed that. It's really important. Have we as a system, are we ready to make sure it is really successful? And we're calling now, I think, a little bit of a risk there, because yeah, we haven't quite got the plans in place across the system. But Joe, do you want to give a little sort of slight input from yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Shane. So you are absolutely right. We have escalated this risk because we do want board line of sight on this. You know, for our system in particular, and acknowledging the fact that we do need to make sure that we are system ready, because we are one of only a handful of ICBs who chose to employ our lived experience people in the way that we have done. That has significantly benefited our system from the training that we have been able to develop. We are working, and the People Committee has a focus on this, and the team is working closely with system partners. It's not moving as quickly as it needs to. In order to be assured that from the 1st of April, when the ICB funding ends and we have to step away from this, that we will continue the momentum, and in fact grow the momentum that we have been able to start as part of the ICB's input into and sort of leadership of this work. So that's why it's appearing here, colleagues. Thank you.
So Joe, I mean, that's really, really helpful. You've got leaders from across the system here. What is the specific ask you'd like people to take away to their organisations today?
It's the same ask, if I'm honest, Alison, that we put through the People Committee to the non-exec representatives on the ICS People Committee, which is that you ask the questions of your teams and you remove barriers that might be just holding them up from being able to make decisions. There's not a willingness to do this. It seems that it might actually just be stuck in system governance, in financial issues, in organisational change within organisations and partners themselves. But that's not a reason for it not actually for it to be held up in terms of the decision making, because we are going to get to a crunch point where we are going to run out of time.
Okay, so it will be helpful for people around this table to go back into their organisations to ask a question. Yes, thank you. Jaya.
Just to expand on that, ask where the blockage is perceived to be, so that we can at least understand what they're seeing from their side, because then at least we can take some action and do, provide some support on that front.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Jaya. Ellen, and then Stuart. Thank you.
Just from a practical perspective, I'd like to sort of understand, this is obviously really, really important. John's highlighted that, so has Joe and Shane. So what is our follow-up to this? When will we, what is the procedure we're going to put in place so that because this is going to be a tough one. Because as you say, Joe, I'm sure system leaders, appreciate how important this is, but there's an awful lot going on. How do we get it towards the top of the agenda, and also how do we just make sure it is in place so that when we do step away, it doesn't all just fall to pieces? Thanks.
Thanks, Ellen. Hold on to that, Joe, for the moment, if that's all right, and we'll just bring Stuart in. Thanks.
Thanks. Joe, I'm happy to pick this up with you offline. Okay, I think I'm very cited on this issue, just to be clear, on behalf of the group. This hasn't been lost in a governance morass. but does require some clarifications, I think, for us to know where we are in this space. So I'm happy to pick that up and give an assurance that we recognise, especially as John says, for this region, the importance of getting this right. So please just take a little bit of assurance about that. We are totally sighted on it. I could quote the whole issue here if you really wanted me to, but I think probably better we take the detail offline.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. That's incredibly helpful. Jo, let's come back to you to finish on this one.
Yeah, thank you, and Stuart, thank you. And we are aware that actually there's a date now for the hospital group to make a decision on this, which is I think the 15th of October. That information came through yesterday, so very grateful for that. So I think in terms of next steps, we have a plan of how we're working with organisations to make sure that's with the local teams. So we are sticking to our timelines, which include October and November responses from organisations. And as I say, if we can ask the leadership of this team, the leadership of this board, to go back into their organisations and just make sure that there are no that they can help remove some of the blockages that have been highlighted to us as examples of why the decisions have not yet been made. Not that they won't be made, but they have not yet been made. But it was really important to escalate this to the board because it does need this gravitas of input and this senior leadership lens. So thank you, Alison.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jo. Any other questions or comments on either the corporate risk register, the second new risk around ICB performance, or the strategic risk register? No. And in terms of the lead exec for the new risk around ICB performance, is there anything you would want to add in? That's you, Shane, I guess, if it's the office of the chair and chief exec.
It's the impact on the reforms you're referring to.
Yes, the impact of the reforms on ICB performance. Yeah.
Absolutely, it absolutely is me feeding through the transition committee, and we have a whole system of how we are connecting the transition risk from the transition risk register, which is presented on the transformation committee, all the way through to our corporate. So I don't know whether Rob, you want to add anything more than that, but we're absolutely connecting the two of them together and reviewing those risks very regularly at transition group and committee. But Rob?
I was probably going to just say the same thing, Shane, and say we've got the transition risk register. It comes to the transition committee. This risks is a way of saying there are things going on around organisational change which will impact on the business. This is by way of putting one risk, not lots and lots and lots of risks, unnecessarily so, on a corporate risk register. There are other risks that may, by the process of risk scoring through the directorates, find their way onto this corporate risk register, which are linked somehow to the organisational changes. For example, there is one you'll notice on there that's still scoring 20, which is around employee relations. That's linking back to shaping the future. There may be similar going forward. And in fact, I'm not going to break any secrets here and go, there's already risks that Joe's got on Joe's People Directorate risk register, which are around potential impact on staff and employee relations, but they're not sufficiently high yet to put them on the corporate risk register. So that's just, I suppose, a little bit of demonstration about how the process works. If you like, below 15, but once risk score 15 and above, that's when they get escalated. So please take some assurance from that.
Thank you very much, Rob. So we're being asked to review the corporate risk register, which we have, and the strategic risk register. And we're specifically asked to agree the recommendation to remove the identified risks that are suggested in the paper. Anyone disagree with removing the risks that are recommended for coming off? No. Okay. So we've got a full house of approval of the recommendations, Rob and Shane. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we've been going an hour and 3/4. I just wonder whether we have 6 minutes. So it just a comfort break. So it's 14:28. If we come back at 25:02, so 7 minutes, I think that just might help because we've got quite a few committee updates to do. So see you in 7 minutes. I don't wonder whether
Alison,
7
I was
minutes is
sitting
just
here.
enough. Oh, yeah, go on, Stuart.
I was sitting here looking at you, thinking you were nursing director when I was a consultant at Yeovil, weren't you?
Don't say the decade.
Oh, you're mute.
Oh.
No, you know. Oh.
No, don't. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Hang on, no.
Yeah, I think
on.
Stuart, you might have. Can you hear me now, Stuart?
Now, yeah.
Yeah, don't say the decade, Stuart. That wouldn't be ladylike, would it? To say the decade. But I was the director of nursing in Yeovil, yeah. And you were a consultant in Taunton.
When I was a cardiologist. No, I was a cardiologist in Yeovil for a while. When you, I was just sitting there racking my brains.
Yes. No, that
was a while.
Oh, all right. Yeah, it was 2006 to 2009.
Right, okay, yeah. So you weren't nursing director then. There must have been a sort of divisional nursing director or something. Because I left in 2002, went to Taunton. There you go.
Right. Okay. It's 25 to 3. I hope 7 minutes was enough for people. I just felt after an hour and 3/4 it probably was right. We've now got the committee updates, and this is an important part of assurance for the board, isn't it? About the work that the committees do on our behalf. Helen, starting with you on outcomes, quality, and performance. Thanks.
Thanks, Alison. I'm going to bring Rosie in a minute because she's got an update. Just to say, though, that there has been no meeting and therefore no committee update at this meeting. I would like to just repeat an earlier conversation that at the last meeting, last board meeting, delegated responsibility for assurance of winter plan was given to System Executive Group, which we call SEG. Due to the timing of OQP committee, the committee had not seen the developed winter plan, and so it was agreed that Alison, chairing today, and myself would hold a check and challenge. We did that on Monday. This was then followed up with a session at SEG where there was a great deal of discussion. We fed back that we believed that the plan was well constructed and data driven, but there were some risks on delivery. So I've mentioned this earlier, we've had some conversation on it, but I just wanted to sort of reiterate that for the purpose of these minutes. I am now happy, unless Dave wants to come in on that, I am now happy to hand over to Rosie to discuss the other issue under my agenda item.
Dave, did you want to come in?
I think just to conclude the action, we had a long discussion at the board meeting last month around the winter plan, and it was the act that was delegated to SEG was the submission of the board assurance statement. The board assurance statement was submitted by the ICB board, but with a caveat that further work around delivery and assurance within the acute provider board, and that work's ongoing through the next few weeks. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Dave. Over to you, Rosie.
And I would just add to that the bit that we discussed this morning as well about an SQG HCPE review once the EQI and QI is done to make sure we close that kind of governance loop, and then that will feed back through to committee. So we'll have the full kind of governance loop closed off around the winter planning.
Rosie, can I just were there a lot of abbreviations in what you just said, because we are in a public meeting, and I just wonder whether you might want to just say it for people listening.
Apologies, colleagues, I slipped into internal vocabulary, didn't I? So we have a pair of meetings that happen at a system level. One is called the System Quality Group, and one is the Health and Care Professional Executive. And we use those two forward to make sure that health and care leaders in the system can oversee certain elements of decision making, pathway changes, and risk management. And so what we will do is do a meeting in common of those two groups to review the quality and equality impact assessment of the winter plan to make sure that control loops happened fully with full health and care leadership oversight of it. Thank you, Alison, for the check on that one.
Thanks, Rosie, that's helpful.
I will take the quality report as read. As Ellen says, it refers to sort of almost Q1 data, because we haven't had a quality committee since to look at the more up-to-date data, and our governance route is that we would take things to committee before they come to board. Board will see that there's a lot of focus on infection prevention control around TB, measles and MRSA, although we perform well and have very, very good joint working on infection control. We do have some tricky spots in our population, particularly around MRSA, that we're focusing on, and some TB. The bit I particularly wanted to just check in is we have got our draft leader annual report written. That is later than usual this year, as is in common with the rest of the country. I would like Board's permission, if you are happy, to take that through Outcome Quality Performance Committee in later this month, and ask if Board are happy for committee to delegate the sign off that report for publication. I will of course bring it here as part of our committee update later, but I'm keen to get it published before the end of the calendar year. And I think if I wait to bring it to Board, you might get quite delayed in that. So it's whether Board members are happy for me to do that.
Thanks, Rosie. So let's pause on that one, because that's a specific ask, isn't it, of the board? Are the board happy to delegate responsibility for sign-off of the leader annual report to Ellen's committee, and the report will then come to board for information, but it's a timing thing. So does anybody disagree with the delegation of the sign-off of the leader annual report? Okay, Rosie, I think you've got that agreement.
There were two tiny bits I thought bits of celebrating. So in the quality report, we look at the survey of our trainees in the system, and you can see the survey results are good for our system, which is really positive, which means people coming into our healthcare system are enjoying their learning experience, as usually junior doctors. So really good piece there. And also we've done some work which did come out a bit out of COVID and a bit out of lead around respect. So this is making sure that people are having their wishes respected at the time of their death or at their end of life. And we did some work to make sure respect forms for people with learning disability were being properly discussed with them. And that's come out really positively. So that's a good piece of news as well. But other than that, I'll close down there, Alison, and take questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Rosie. Any questions or observations for Rosie on the report or any of the verbal update? No, I think that's great, Rosie, noted. Dave, in terms of the performance report, is there anything that you wanted to...
I don't think so, Alison. The actual text report, as people can see, is also quite dated, because as Ellen said, we haven't had a committee. The performance report is there, and I have to say, Alison, in terms of change in trend since last month, nothing new to add. Strong performance against the majority of our operational plan standards, an ongoing challenge in a couple of areas, which I drew out last month, notably out of area placements to mental health and CYP access. I would note that there was strong urgent care performance over the summer. Cat 2 and handover delays have remained strong through September, but as we come out of the summer, kind of increasing challenge around 4-hour performance and flow. Reference back the winter plan discussion and the importance of focusing on delivery of our winter plan. And that's probably all I need to say today, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments or questions for Dave on the written performance report? No, thanks, Dave. Ellen,
just to say, the next meeting is 22nd of October, so in 2 weeks' time. So we'll be going back over an awful lot we've discussed today then. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Ellen. Jaya, People Committee.
Thank you, Alison. We're continuing to hold bi-monthly report meetings for the ICB people committees so that we can support the organisational change. There have been a number of policies that have been updated and aligned with Gloucestershire ICB. They include pay protection policy, organisational change policy, and also at BNSSG we've adopted a formal domestic abuse policy. As to date, this has been dealt with by the Freedom to Speak Up, as you're familiar with, Alison, and other staff support mechanisms. Our ICS People Committee met last week, and although minutes aren't attached as yet, the meeting had a really strong focus on supporting staff, especially with regards to violence and aggression, and a continued focus on anti-racism. We've already had a deep chat about this today. This has come up before, but we've recognised that as organisations and as a system, we have to step up support, especially during this migration. It's really important that we don't lose anything on this front as we transform to a strategic commissioning body. We also received a report, a presentation on the Healthier Together 2040 strategic intentions, and discussed the strategic workforce elements and the response we need. And our committee has asked the strategic workforce team in the ICB to work with the System People Programme Board so that we can consider what that means for workforce planning next year and also the medium-term plan. That's all it is for me.
Thank you, Jaya. Jo, is there anything you wanted to add from an executive point of view?
No, nothing to add. I've taken up enough time on today's agenda, I think. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks very much, Jaya. Any comments or questions for Jaya on the People Committee? No. Thank you very much, Jaya. That's great. Steve, Finance, Estates and Digital Committee.
Thanks. I'll take the paper as read, which is the August papers. I just wanted to point out a couple of things relating to the financial position. The ICB is continuing to track to deliver a financial position, which is break even. But what we're seeing are the significant risks within the system, in particular, the acute providers, MBT and UHBW, where they're tracking and we are going to require a fair amount of effort and energy putting into recovering their position. What we're seeing is increased demand, efficiency challenges and technical accounting issues, all of which are being looked at. So we're on recovery plans, are in development. We're monitoring and triangulating that and mitigating the risks that we're carrying. But it's important that we recognise we're under significant pressure on our finances in the system, and that is something that we'll keep a very close eye on. Other things that we've considered, we met on the 25th of September, so we've had a recent meeting. We are very clearly focusing on not only delivering for the ICB, but also looking at the transition position and making sure that anything we're doing has an eye on the future transition. So we've been looking at approvals and recommendations for procurement and working our way through that, signalling to Transition Board where we believe there'll be further ongoing work required in terms of those new contracts. We've done a deep dive around digital in primary care, and that's important because we're looking to see how we can use technology that's currently being piloted to improve efficiency in primary care. A really, really solid piece of work and very important. We also had a report on health inequalities for the first, looking at ICB wide health inequalities, and that's a very, very strong paper. And we've agreed as a committee that what we want to do is to make sure that as we consider financial decisions, we are looking very closely at the impact on reducing health inequalities. So the decisions we're making, thinking about where do we need to move resource to reduce health inequalities. So that's an ongoing piece of work, and we'll come back to the main board. Obviously we are in the territory of planning round for the following year, and that's work that's ongoing, and we're keeping close in terms of working in partnership with Gloucestershire. The other thing that we're trying to ensure is that we know that in our future form, we are going to have very good sight on data. And so therefore a lot of work around digital and data updates and ensuring that we're moving our digital and data requirements into organisations as the ICB transitions. So we're managing a number of risks across the system, but I think at this stage we're on those and mitigating. So we'll give an update at the next board in terms of how we're progressing in terms of both the finances, but also making sure that the transition of data movement is happening. So overall, very busy, but on it.
Thank you, Steve. Matt, do you want to talk about the finance report, and then we'll take questions and comments to both you and Steve at the same time?
Great, yeah. I think Steve has largely covered the points I wanted to make. I'll of course take the point as read. Two main financial pressures we're observing are in the ADHD and autism space and in section 117. But as Steve set out, the ICB within its organisation, we feel we have mitigations for those risks and probably be able to deliver sort of a modest surplus as an organisation, and we're continuing to work through that. The risk is, however, in the system position, and of course our responsibility to help maintain that position. So we are working through that. The trusts are submitting recovery plans to the Performance and Recovery Board at the start of October in line with our internal escalation framework, and we're working on a system recovery plan alongside that. So those are probably the points, just to echo really what Steve said, but very happy, of course, to take questions on any of the detail in the reports.
Thank you. And of course, Debs, I should ask if there's anything from a digital point of view you'd like to raise.
Thank you. I just wanted to amplify a couple of points that Steve's outlined. One is, obviously, as we are moving to a digital by default set of expectations about how we support people where it's appropriate to do so, we do need to think about how digital and data feeds into the planning round. So that's something at the Digital Delivery Board that colleagues have been focused on. So we will be making sure that that becomes part and parcel of this. Obviously, we had a conversation and a brief from Shane around neighbourhoods. Without the right type of technology, neighbourhoods simply won't work. The ability to integrate care around the person does require us to have the right digital systems. And then the other thing I wanted to flag was we did have a great presentation from Reese at OneCare on primary care. And just to really amplify, we host the primary care lab on behalf of the region. And obviously that has UE, Steve can't say that, but I can. That has UE's input. So what we have on our patch is one of the most advanced capabilities to be able to understand and drive forward and test how primary care works. And the team at OneCare are working very closely and have really demonstrated alongside GPCB how we make sure we are leading the way in terms of ambient voice technology and how we start to see some of those benefits for the efficiency of primary care. But I do want to flag up, we need to keep a focus on this, because if we take our eye off the ball, we are already very far behind. So we will have to make some tough decisions as we go forward as a board to start to think about how we invest in data and digital going forward. And as Steve said, we're starting to kind of bump into some of that. And I think we will continue to over the coming year or so.
Lovely, thanks, Debs. So general comments, questions. Julie, over to you.
Yeah, it's just a request really. I've picked up everything. When we have noticed in a number of papers, when we talk about ADHD and autism, could we be clear whether we're talking children or adults? Because actually they've both got real challenges, and I think sometimes it gets a bit hidden, and I might be thinking, oh, that's okay, that's adult, or it's children. So just a plea really, so that we start to get a sense of where each of the challenges are, because they're quite different, aren't they?
Yeah. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, it's in both actually, Julie, but yeah, you're right.
No, absolutely. The challenges are in both, but the solutions may be slightly different. And yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. So thanks very much, Steve. Primary Care Committee. There's one area to escalate to the board, which Dave will give a brief update on, which is the issue with Jehoot's pharmacy provision in the southwest, particularly in BNSSG, which has attracted a fair amount of media attention and obviously affects people and patients. So I would like Dave to pick up on that, on the latest position. At committee, I think we were very confident about the approach that all the ICB's colleagues and partners were working together. The strength that's been through primary care committee about the relationships is huge, and that's colleagues in Dave's team, it's colleagues in Joe's team, Debbie Campbell. But there is an issue with Jehut, so I will ask Dave to bring that. Obviously, we had a more detailed briefing, which was appropriate for closed session. Other comments to make from committee. We had a patient safety report, which was a really important report, and it was a position statement really about where we are with primary care, and particularly this is primary medical services safety, and it is in a different place to other providers, and particularly acute care, in terms of the ability to collect data, what that data tells you, and what the focus is on around improvement for patient safety. I thought it was a really important report. We thought it was an important report, and it was mixed because there were areas of progress and there were areas where we haven't made a lot of progress. I think looking forward to the clustering, it will be an important report to act as a baseline for BNSSG as part of the new cluster organisation, and it's a work in progress. So I don't know if Rosie would want to pick up on that, but I think it is watch this space for that. The report I did want to highlight that was provided in the pack, the board has always been really interested, quite rightly, on things like dental access. And I just wanted the board to see that the primary care access objectives for this year, just to remind us, and there are 4. It's about appointments in general practice. It's about percentage of general practice appointments within 2 hours of asking. It's the units of dental activity delivered, and the number of pharmacy first consultations. All of these things are crucial for flow and people being seen in the right place in the right system. There's some good progress in the challenges. You can see that in the GP access, appointments are higher. The percentage of people being within 2 weeks is higher than the South West average. The units of dental activity is increasing. It's on track. I think that's really, really commendable. And that means that more people are getting access to dental care. So that's really, really important for us. And the pharmacy first, which we know, I think has been reported to board before. BNSSG has been the highest performing ICB in the country. But for example, 11,800 on average referrals to community pharmacy first, community pharmacy, which is taking people away from other aspects in the system. So it's considerably helping the system, and we saw that at committee. There is a 4th objective around eye care, which we've noted has had some slower work stream on it, but the eye care delivery board is now up and running, and we will be asking this committee around what the outputs and the outcomes are expected of that for the next year. So I thought it was helpful to remind the board about committee's focus on making sure that the primary care access objectives are achieved this year. So Dave, did you want to mention Jehut's briefly?
Briefly, Alison, but just comment on the previous report, and just to note the other core operational standard with national focus is around access to urgent dental appointments. You noted the UDA appointments, but also on that report notes our delivery against the urgent care access. As you'll see, we're tracking slightly under where we would want to be in terms of urgent care access, but we have now commissioned fully our allocation of urgent care access. So we are now hoping to see that rapidly improve over the next few months, but we'll continue to track that because that is one of those core standards. Thank you, Alison. Just in terms of Jehut's pharmacy, I imagine many members will be aware of challenges with this community pharmacy provider. It's a national, regional and local issue with this provider struggling to maintain comprehensive service, and we are seeing a number of temporary closures, lack of stock in a number of branches. This has culminated in the closure of a branch in Portishead, and you'll see others across the country. So this is a provider that has got national and regional focus. As Alison said, we continue to work with the provider with general practices that are affected to manage the situation. However, there is clearly ongoing patient safety risk and also service risk, because when a pharmacy is closed, it puts significant burden on surrounding practices. So we are working with the provider, patients, public health teams, general practices and other pharmacies in managing this situation. The NHS Commissioning Hub, as part of NHS England, are working to work through the contractual levers that we can in terms of support and challenge with the provider, and we continue to put mitigating actions in place in terms of additional provision and provision through other pharmacies to ensure that patients can access medication safely. We'll continue to escalate through the Primary Care Committee, but just so the board is aware publicly of challenges and the actions that we're taking with Jehut's Pharmacy. Thank you, Alison.
Thanks very much, Dave. And I just for the minutes, I want to note Richard, because he's had to leave us. He wanted to note the progress made with the percentage of people able to see their preferred healthcare profession in general practice. And he's also got a question for you around urgent dental care. So just so that we've captured those. Great. Are there any questions around primary care? Ellen?
Yeah, thanks, Alison. I just wanted to re-emphasise that the richness of the discussion that we had at Primary Care Committee on the Jehut's situation. There was an awful lot of discussion and concern over the situation. My questions were on whether we had the skills and capability within the ICB to firstly consider the significant contract issues, and secondly dealing with the present operational issues, making sure that the residents of our system area are the needs are met. I was assured by Dave and his team that things were under control and that Dave had escalated this to a regional level. We also further had a conversation about lessons learned and so that we can feed these into future contracting decisions. So I just wanted to just show my support for the work that's been done and the richness of the conversation that we had. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Dave?
Thank you, Alan. And just to reiterate, this is a organisational wide response to the situation. So it's my team in terms of performance and contracts, and members of Joe's Medicines Optimisation team in the form of Debbie Campbell and Alison Mundell, and the Commissioning Hub. So we've got all resources appropriate resources focused on this one. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. Right, let's go on to Strategic Health and Equalities Prevention Population Health Committee. Jeff, anything?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Alison. The papers or the minutes have been circulated so people can look at the detail. But we discussed three substantive items, really. One around alcohol and drugs, the second around smoke-free BNSSG, and the third one on healthy weight, which is being launched on Monday in Stoke Gifford. Really, really rich conversations, and just reinforced to me how this is going to be a central pillar of how we commission services going forward, that focus on health inequality and population health. So again, from this committee, there's stuff coming out from it that is probably different to what's coming into our normal committee conversations. But I don't know whether you want to bring Jo in she might talk in a bit more detail, but the actual outcomes of those three areas of work are all listed in those, are all listed in those minutes that have been circulated to the board.
Lovely, thank you, Jeff. Jo, did you want to come in?
You know, I was in Norway, so I don't feel I'm particularly well informed about that particular meeting, but I said you've got the minutes. But I do the quality of the discussion and the breadth and the depth of it and the insight that gets generated. And I think it is, if you look at the makeup of the committee, the diversity within the committee, the commitment to paid public participation, and we saw that in the sort of the VCSE paper about acknowledging people's worth by actually acknowledging their time in the way of payment. It is we all those principles we put into that committee, and I think you get a richness and a depth that maybe we don't get some of the others. And we also give it good amount of time to go very deep into topics rather than very large agendas in relatively small time scale. So there are some bits of learning about how we might do some of that in that mixture of doing the day-to-day work that we have to do, but also doing that thinking in things that are important to us. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks very much, Jo. Any comments, questions for Jeff's committee? No. Okay, John, anything to report from the Audit and Risk Committee?
Thanks, Alison. Probably just three things. We met on the 12th of September. We don't yet have minutes available. First one to pull out is that the transition committee risks have been incorporated into the risk register scrutiny work that's undertaken by the Audit and Risk Committee. So that's becoming part of how we do things. We had just one final internal audit report this time, and that related to funded care following the introduction last year of the Care Assurance Panel to oversee all age commissioning. That was satisfactory. Yes, in summary, a good basis. It was felt that a good basis had been put in place, and some helpful recommendations from the internal auditors, which are intended to enhance effectiveness, were generally satisfactory overall. And the final one, I just wanted to pull out the internal audit progress report that we see each time, and just to say that in spite of everything that Shane and the exec team are grappling with, this was really positive. I'd say I'd probably go as far as to say it was one of the best that we've seen, because we had 21 closed actions this time. We had no extensions requested, and nothing that was yet to be implemented. So I think in light of everything that's happening, really positive to see. So yeah, thank you all and very well done. And I'll leave it there, Alison. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. Any observations or questions for John from Audit and Risk? No, thank you very much, John. Southwest Specialised Services Committee, it's got Dave and Shane's names, so
yeah,
right.
There has been nothing more on that committee, and there has been one meeting. Dave, do you want to give an update?
Not a lot more than just said, Shane. There has been one meeting that I've now attended. We weren't asked to make any decisions. It was a business as usual conversation, Alison, just in terms of contract management, and so no items for escalation or action here. Thank you. Okay,
thank you very much. And the Integrated Care Partnership update, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Alison. I'd appreciate committee members or board members' views on this one, really, because as we move into the transition, obviously Gloucestershire Health and Wellbeing Board is their Integrated Care Partnership. There's no change there. They still remain in legislation. Unless there's any change in legislation, we'll still operate them. That said, we know in BNSSG that it's a rotated chair amongst the chairs of our health and wellbeing boards from the local authority. So there's an elected member that chairs, and Jenna is chairing at the moment from North Somerset. And actually, it's a really good conversation in there. What came out from the last session was an action for me, and I've discussed it with Shane, about talking about the value of integrated care partnerships and what they might look like going forward, because this is the dilemma. When we had our previous iterations before integrated care boards, we actually had a partnership group that was chief execs and chairs of our major providers, and including the CCG, and we all met together and talked about where we were working as a system. When we moved into the ICB, obviously all chief execs came into the ICB structure, which is the statutory board. But the ICP, the invite there was for all chairs. Now, if we don't have an ICP, my concern is that we don't have a forum that brings together chairs across the system. So unless I convene that or someone else does, then that doesn't exist. And likewise, if the membership of integrated care boards changes by partner participation, we may not have that forum at non-exec level there as well. So it's to throw it open, really, and we will come up with some proposals and perhaps bring them back here. But just getting our heads around it as the structures start to change. Where are we going to ensure there is a collective conversation amongst our most senior people by way of chairs, elected members, and senior executives about how we're working collaboratively across the system? So I don't know whether Shane wasn't at that last meeting. I know Jo was, but but I don't know whether, Shane, whether you want to come in on that and any thoughts, because we have discussed it.
Yeah, I think the challenge is when the ICP was created, it had a single focus, which was to develop a strategy for the system and then enable other parts of the system to deliver on that strategy. It was very clear. And the ICP in statute is a subcommittee of this board, actually. And in the guidance in the 22 Act, there's very little reference to it, apart from each ICB, each system should have an ICP. I think now is just the opportunity to rather than just assume we reinvent, despite the fact, obviously, the 10-year plan said ICPs will go. So just rolling it forward, I think there is an opportunity to say, what is the right structure in our system for engaging at different levels? Because we have strong health and wellbeing boards. Are they the right level? We have an ICP, so we could theoretically say we'll just create this big ICP for the new cluster. So I just think there's a series of conversations we need to have at different levels, because we absolutely want to get political voice into our conversations. We absolutely want to get officer voice into our conversations. We know we're going to be covering 4 local authority areas. So at what level? Is it system? Is it local authority? Is it locality? So there's a lot of, I think, over the next couple of months, creating some thought space for us to design some potential models, because the ICP was never about governance, because it's not a governance architecture, but it was about trying to drive us as a collective system. So we're just going to have to create a space where people can come in and we can start to talk about how we get it to be lean. I don't want to just have an ICP for the sake of having an ICP. It needs to be lean. But it has to be a place where very many people can come in and give thoughts and views. And maybe you do start from working with the local authorities, health and wellbeing boards, existing ICP members, and saying, right, what's the role and function of this thing? Because it was clear in the 10-year plan, ICPs won't exist, okay? But I think the function of bringing decision makers across a system together shouldn't be one that we throw out. And therefore we need to create some kind of space to create a new version of it.
And Shane, where will that thought discussion take place? Where are you expecting that? Because landing it today is really important, but where are you thinking that will happen?
We're going to have to create the space for it. There is no natural place for it to happen. So whether it's we set up a number of workshops to bring people in, whether we use existing networks such as VCSE Alliance, such as the Health and Wellbeing Board, but we are going to have to create that space, because there isn't a natural space where that will come together.
Right. Okay. A couple of hands have gone up. So 3, in fact. Fiona, over to you first, then Joe.
Thanks, Alison. So I sit on the Integrated Care Partnership as VCSE Alliance and representative of ACFA, the advice network for the not-for-profit advice sector. And so I've been part of these conversations, and the value of the ICP is it's the only real space that brings localities, health and wellbeing boards, acutes, VCSE and others into a shared space. And one of the big worries that we've got as we move into neighbourhood health is that, yes, we've got the hyper local, but we could actually be going more into siloed working without that system view. So if we haven't got that space for the thought leadership, for the strategic thinking, for the melting pot of ideas, then we could find that actually we start to become a bit more rudderless as we move forward. And just on the back of the SHIPPH conversation and creating that space and that deep dive, I wonder whether there's a bit of a synergy between the two in creating that kind of strategy thinking.
Thanks, Fiona. I think that's a great segue. I'll go into Joe and Jeff, and then Shane, you might want to come back in. But Joe, over to you.
Yeah, we did talk about the SHIPPH and its approach to the ICP, but Jeff made a very valid comment, which of course there's the role between the executive, the executive and the provider landscape, and then the non-executive leadership. So how does that work together? So there is something in it, Fiona, but I think we've got to think it through. Really indulge James, because we probably do need to make some creative time. Things that I that, again, not to solve that problem, but just to some of the things we need to consider: the role of neighbourhoods, the development of neighbourhoods, the voices within neighbourhoods coming in. Because again, you're right, I completely agree with you. You know, we could have all these brilliantly individually functioning neighbourhoods, but all doing things slightly different, and that structural inequality bit just widening and widening and widening over time. How do we amend for that? And then the patient voice worries me. Obviously, the news about the health watch. I think, you know, we've got PPGs set up across the system. Do we do something with that, where the patient voice from primary care becomes much stronger represented? How would we do that in a slightly more organised way? Because it feels to me like we are diminishing that in these new structures. So again, don't want to solve the problem here, but all those things just need to be put into the melting pot.
Thank you, Jo. Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do need to create the space. I would like our chief execs and those who are representing organisations to go away and think about this one, because at the moment we've been pretty reliant on reporting back from the ICB to chairs, because they don't always all turn up at the ICP, but it's been an important function. So when ICPs were legislated, the purpose wasn't that clear. It was about setting the strategy and not much more. So I think in BNSSG, we've created a space that has added a lot of value, which has gone beyond just creating the strategy. Now, as we start to move forward, that could easily be lost very, very quickly. And we won't have a space where we're having that conversation. So it is an appeal to me. We don't want to have meetings for the sake of meetings. But my challenge was, if I'm chairing the ICB for both Gloucestershire and BNSSG, where am I having a collective, not individual, but collective conversations with system leaders, whether they be executive or non-executive, and what does that look like? So it might not be an ICP, but it might be something where we need to create that space, I think, or otherwise people will not feel informed or engaged.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. I think there's a space for we need something to deliver at that level of community, and I think there's a space for the locality partnership boards and the locality partnership collective to be in that thought space about what comes next and how they can be involved with that. And reflecting on what Jeff says, we don't need meetings for meeting's sake, but we need them to be agile and to be reflective of what our communities, not only what they are experiencing health-wise, but actually those wider experiences that impact people's health. And it would be remiss of me as to not pick up on what Jo says regarding the news on Health Watch. We're at a time where until the King's Speech is made, Health Watch across our patch exists and it continues to work. I should mention I'm the CEO of an organisation that manages the Health Watch organisations across our patch. Health Watch continues to deliver. It won't go anywhere until the 2012 Care Act is changed. And that leads to other conversations that we've heard here today. The first paper talking about a lack of trust in systems. The proposals from the 10-year plan are to bring the voice of patients into those systems where there is already a perceived lack of trust. And that's not about me edging everybody to defend Health Watch, but there's an independence in people's voices within systems that we must protect to ensure that those most vulnerable and those who feel most excluded from systems actually feel like they can speak up. So sorry for tagging that rant in there, but ICPs, or at least the future of ICPs, I think locality boards can definitely help shape.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll bring Jake in now, and then Shane, I wondered whether you could summarise what you think the next steps action is based on Jeff's comment earlier. So Jacob.
So I think that description of joined up collaborative leadership at the senior level is going to be really important, and the role that providers having coming together as a provider group and the role of the IHO, where that fits into this conversation, because the ICB has sat in that sort of convening space within the ICP's auspices, and for me, just alluding back to a conversation, developing that culture of change. What we need is providers to be working close together, for the very senior leaders of those organisations to be having that challenge amongst themselves without feeling under oversight or scrutiny that they need to be saying the right thing. They sort of need to work out how they steer their organisations to build and work together right to the level of patient delivery. So just to throw that into the mix, again, no solution, but I think it's an important consideration.
Yes, thanks very much, Jake. Shane, having heard all of this and Jeff starting off, what will you take away?
Yeah, I suppose it sparked a couple of thoughts. We have established 8 programs of work to create the new ICB. Maybe there's a 9th, which is actually the overarching ICP engagement architecture, because we could end up creating an organization called the ICB, but not in the context of that 10-minute conversation we've just had, which is actually, it's in the context of a much wider strategic architecture that's disappearing, the ICP. Although, to take Kevin's point, until legislation's changed, it's also not going anywhere. I think that's the important thing we need to just be certain on, is that it's not disappearing tomorrow. So I suppose what I'd like to do is actually have a conversation with the exec team and system partners about what process we could establish. Now, the ICP itself needs to be in the middle of that process. This can't be an ICB process doing 2. So we do have to have Jeff as deputy chair and obviously the chair of the ICP need to come together and say, right, what's the process? But I think we've got that commitment from the ICP. I mean, I wasn't at the last meeting. Fiona, you certainly were. You know, I think there is a commitment that the gathering of people to work their way through this, what this is. So I'm more than happy to bring it into the exec team. We'll define, you know, some kind, maybe another work stream, and actually then start talking with the ICP, or continue talking with the ICP about how this might work into the future. Okay, so I'm more than happy to take that on. The point Jake raises is a fascinating point, which is slightly further than that, which is actually with all the architecture moving, you know, IHOs, new foundation trusts, multi-community contracts, all that kind of stuff. Does the system have an operating framework yet? And the answer is no. Okay, I think there's just too many moving parts. But you are correct, because in that new I would perceive in that new operating framework, partners, providers will be talking to providers, will be working with providers, not with the ICB being the system convener, but be working with providers, because providers need to talk to providers to make sure they provide for the population they serve. And there's no way at 3:20 at the end of a long board meeting we're going to get into that kind of conversation. But that's actually a really big conversation that has to be had. Once we get the operating framework really worked out between region, national, system, between the role and function of ICB, who is working in our system in a convening way? And it will be providers with providers. I mean, that's the reality of the new framework that's been established. ICBs are commissioners, providers are providers in a new context, and that takes us into a big conversation about the operating framework of the system of the future. And we've not even begun to scratch the surface of that one, Chair. But it is something we've got to get in the next 3 to 6 months to really begin to understand how does the system of the future work, given all the changes.
Thanks, Shane. Jeff.
Yeah, I agree what Shane said, and there's complexity in there. But I think some things are in our gift. And within the blueprint, it does say about ICB still being system conveners. And actually, whilst we might not be legislated in a certain way, I think for us in our locality, and I say our locality, being SSG, we still have an opportunity to step into that leadership space in some form of senior leadership forum about how we come together. If we don't, it just won't happen, and we will fractionalize our conversations. So it's an appeal. I think we need to think it through and talk it through, though.
Yeah. Great. So, Jeff, are you happy with the next steps in terms of Shane having a bit more thinking and trying to get that space for coming together?
Yeah, I think so. It's an action from the ICP. It was a commitment I gave at the last meeting, and I think both myself and Shane and others need to go back into that next ICP and talk about where we think that looks. But at the moment, there's a lot of other stuff to do as well. And Shane's absolutely right. until the legislation changes, we will have an integrated care partnership. So it could be a long time.
Thank you. Right, okay, so we're on to questions from members of the public. There's been one question raised by a member of the public, an inquiry from somebody called Amy about the care provided by AWP for their partner. Amy is already liaising with the AWP Patient Advice and Liaison Service, and the ICB's customer services team have been asked to assist Amy. Amy's inquiry relates to early access to a care coordinator and structured clinical management. So I wanted the board to know we'd had an inquiry, but it's not for board. It's in place, and Amy will get the support that she needs through what I've just described. There have been no other questions from members of the public. Is there any other business before we finish today? So the date of the next meeting, the next formal open board meeting is the 4th of December. We have a board seminar in November on the 6th, which is at UE. And Shane, you're right, it has been a long day and we've been in front of our screens, but I have to say the quality of the papers taking us into the quality of the discussions and the contributions from everyone and the energy you could still feel around the room was really brilliant today. So just thank you everyone for contributing and making it, I think, a very productive board day. And see you next time.
Thanks, Alison.
Well Thanks, Alison.
Thank you, Alison.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Well done.
Bye, everyone.
Great. Well.